They thought they already knew how the story would end. A quiet black girl walking onto Yale's grand debate stage, clutching her notes with trembling fingers, standing under the bright lights as laughter rippled through the hall. She looked small against the towering podium, her presence a target for whispered doubts and cruel smirks. Many assumed she wouldn't last a minute. But they were wrong. What happened next would silence every sneer, rewrite the rules of the competition, and become a story retold long after the applause had faded. This wasn't just about winning a debate, it was about proving an entire room full of doubters wrong. Amara Johnson grew up in a neighborhood where ambition often struggled against circumstance. Her family's small home stood wedged between two cracked sidewalks, in a community that was more familiar with factory shifts than academic trophies. Her father worked double hours as a mechanic, his hands permanently marked by oil and grit, while her mother balanced housekeeping jobs, her spine carrying the weight of endless labor. Despite the struggles, they nurtured Amara with books, long talks about fairness, and the belief that her voice mattered even when the world suggested otherwise. From an early age, Amara's fascination was not with toys or fleeting distractions but with words. She would sit in her room, reading passages aloud, shaping her sentences with precision, listening to the power of rhythm in language. She had no fancy tutors, no polished prep schools, no lineage of Ivy League graduates behind her name. What she had was hunger, the kind that grows inside a person when the world underestimates them. Her first real taste of debating didn't come from a prestigious high school program. It came from her community center, a place where volunteers gathered children after school and encouraged them to think critically. Amara often debated issues of justice, fairness, and equality. She would lean forward, eyes steady, her voice rising not in anger but in determination. Listeners began to notice something remarkable. Beneath her quiet frame was a mind sharpened like glass. By the time she entered college, Amara carried her reputation with her. Not as the most experienced debater, but as someone who could dismantle assumptions with startling clarity. Still, even within academic circles, she felt the sting of exclusion. In competitions dominated by wealthy, predominantly white students, her presence stood out. Judges often glanced at her with lowered expectations, sometimes confusing her for an assistant rather than a competitor. Peers whispered when she entered the room, their disbelief barely disguised, and yet, she kept showing up. Each debate was a battle, not just against an opponent, but against the prejudices that shadowed her steps. When the invitation to Yale's national debate tournament arrived, she held it in trembling hands. Yale represented the summit, elite, untouchable, intimidating. It was the kind of place where students wore confidence like tailored suits, where reputations were built on centuries of privilege. For Amara, stepping onto that stage would mean more than competing. It would mean walking into the heart of a system designed to keep her at the margins. She knew eyes would follow her, not out of admiration but curiosity, as if waiting to confirm their assumptions about what she could not do. The day arrived. The hall shimmered with polished wood, tall banners, and the hum of hundreds of students. The audience carried themselves with entitlement, as though this was their natural stage. When Amara stepped forward, alone, in her plain dress, carrying only a folder of notes worn from late nights of study, the reaction was immediate. Laughter rippled across the room, quiet at first, then swelling, cruel in its confidence. They thought they already knew what was coming, but Amara's story was just beginning. The laughter lingered in the air long after she took her place at the podium. It clung to the polished walls of the auditorium, echoing faintly as though the room itself was in on the joke. Amara steadied her breathing, her pulse beating in her temples, her hands gripping the sides of the podium. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the room, the rows of sharp suits, the smirking faces, the judges scribbling as though the decision had already been made. She remembered something her father once told her, late at night after a long shift at the garage. People will judge you before you open your mouth. Your job is to make them regret it. Those words sat in her chest now like an anchor. The competition at Yale was ruthless. The students who made it to this stage had trained for years, coached by elite professionals, backed by schools that invested heavily in their success. They weren't just good, they were polished, rehearsed, and celebrated. Amara knew this. She had read their essays, watched their recorded debates online. They were skilled in the art of intimidation, often overwhelming opponents not with ideas but with sheer presence. Her first round was against a competitor from Princeton, a tall young man who exuded confidence with every step. His opening statement was a performance, slick, fast, layered with rhetorical flourishes that drew approving nods from the audience. When it was her turn, silence seemed to expand in the room. Some leaned forward, expecting stumbles, ready to feast on failure, but Amara began slowly, her voice measured and deliberate. Instead of rushing, she let her words breathe. Each point she made was clear, backed with logic, reinforced with evidence. At first, the audience was restless, but then something shifted. They began to realize she wasn't simply participating, she was dismantling arguments brick by brick. The murmurs quieted, pens stilled, and even her opponent paused, caught off guard by the precision of her reasoning. By the end of the round, it was undeniable. Amara had won. The judges' scores reflected it, though their faces betrayed hesitation, as though they struggled to reconcile their assumptions with reality. Her name advanced on the bracket, word began to spread through the tournament halls. The girl they laughed at was winning. Round after round, Amara faced opponents from Harvard, Columbia, Stanford. Each encounter brought new attempts to discredit her, dismissive tones, smirks when she entered, casual remarks meant to belittle her. Yet with each round, she grew stronger, her arguments sharper, her confidence steadier. She wasn't just surviving, she was excelling. Still, the undercurrent of racism was constant. In one round, a judge questioned her tone, suggesting she sounded too emotional, though her delivery was calm and measured. In another, an opponent openly implied that she was out of place at Yale, his words veiled in academic politeness but dripping with condescension. Amara carried each slight silently, using it as fuel. She refused to let their prejudice write her story. As the tournament advanced, something remarkable began to happen. Students who had laughed at her start grew quiet. Some, grudgingly at first, began to watch her rounds with respect. Others whispered in the corridors about how she was dismantling the very best debaters in the country. A few even admitted, privately, that she was teaching them more about the essence of debate than years of practice had. Amara knew the real challenge was yet to come, the final round. The stage would be bigger, the crowd larger, the scrutiny harsher. The Yale debate tournament was not only about arguments, it was about prestige, reputation, and legacy. She would be standing against the most celebrated debater of the year, someone whose name was already etched in academic circles, someone who had never known what it felt like to be doubted simply for existing. As she prepared that evening, sitting in her dorm room with her notes spread out before her, she thought about the path that had brought her here. The laughter at the beginning, the slights, the whispers, the doubt. And she thought about her parents, working shifts back home, who believed in her before anyone else did. The next morning, as the auditorium filled with hundreds of spectators, Amara walked to the stage one final time. The same hall where laughter had once tried to crush her spirit now seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Some still doubted her. Others now held their breath, waiting to see what she would do. She knew this moment wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had been underestimated, silenced, or dismissed. The final round began under the full blaze of stage lights. The room was packed, the audience brimming with energy. Amara stood across from her opponent, a celebrated debater from Harvard whose confidence filled the stage before he even spoke. His opening statement was thunderous, a cascade of carefully rehearsed arguments delivered with the authority of someone accustomed to applause. The crowd responded predictably, nodding and whispering approval. When it was her turn, Amara stepped forward with deliberate calm. She placed her notes gently on the podium, lifted her chin, and began not with volume, but with clarity. Her voice carried, firm yet steady, each word cutting through the room like glass. Instead of drowning the audience in speed or jargon, she built her case methodically. She broke down complex issues into truths so simple they could not be ignored. At first, the crowd resisted, holding on to their expectations. But as she pressed forward, something remarkable happened. The Harvard debater, confident and polished, began to falter. He spoke faster, his rhythm breaking, his arguments less certain as Amara dismantled them one by one. The audience leaned forward, their loyalty shifting as they realized they were witnessing not just a debate, but a dismantling of arrogance itself. By the time Amara reached her conclusion, the room was silent. No smirks, no laughter, only the weight of her words settling into every corner. She ended with a statement so sharp, so undeniable, that it lingered in the air long after she stepped back. The judges took their time. The room buzzed with tension, students whispering, some already acknowledging what they had seen. Finally, the results were announced. Amara Johnson, victor of the Yale debate tournament. The hall erupted, not with laughter this time, but with thunderous applause. She stood tall, shoulders back, tears stinging her eyes. The same girl they had laughed at only days ago now stood as champion, her voice having reshaped the tournament's legacy. Victory brought more than a trophy. For Amara, it was vindication, a reminder that her worth had never been defined by the assumptions of others. Yet even in triumph, she felt the deeper meaning of her journey. This wasn't only about a debate, it was about challenging a culture of exclusion that had tried to silence her before she spoke at I. In the weeks that followed, her story spread across campuses. Students who had dismissed her now spoke of her brilliance. Professors used her performance as an example of clarity and courage. But beyond recognition, Amara's victory planted something more enduring, a seed of doubt in the minds of those who once laughed, a question about how many voices they had ignored simply because of prejudice. She returned home to her family, the trophy gleaming on the kitchen table. Her parents' pride shone brighter than any accolade. For them, it wasn't about Yale or Harvard, it was about watching their daughter prove that resilience could turn ridicule into applause. Yet Amara knew the work was not finished. Her victory was one story among countless others left untold. For every moment of applause, there were still rooms where voices like hers were silenced before they began. Her triumph was a reminder, not a conclusion. As she reflected on the journey, she carried one truth with her: the power of a voice lies not in how loudly it is heard, but in how deeply it cannot be ignored. And so, her story leaves us with a question. How many others have we laughed at, doubted, or dismissed, only to silence brilliance before it had a chance to rise? The answer to that question will shape not just debates, but the future of every room where injustice waits to be challenged.